Whispers in the dark. Lena had always been cautious when it came to love. Having been burned in the past, she built walls around her heart, never letting anyone get too close. Her job as a journalist allowed her to live a busy life, often lost in research and deadlines, but it was the perfect way to avoid the deep feelings that haunted her. In her world, emotions were best kept at arm's length, or so she thought. One late evening, while attending a gala in the heart of the city, Lena's gaze met his across the crowded room. He was standing near the bar, his tall frame barely noticeable amidst the glittering crowd. But his eyes, they were different. There was a quiet intensity in them, an unspoken invitation that tugged at her in a way she couldn't quite understand. Her breath hitched, and for the first time in years, Lena felt a pull she couldn't ignore. "Are you all right?" A voice interrupted her thoughts, and Lena turned to see her friend Clara standing beside her. Lena blinked, startled, but quickly masked the emotions swirling inside. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steady, but her gaze lingered on the man at the bar, who was now looking directly at her, as though he had been waiting for her to notice him. Clara followed Lena's gaze and raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you're thinking about him." Lena shrugged, but deep down, something in her stirred. There was a magnetic force drawing her toward him, and she couldn't explain why. "What if I am?" she asked quietly, unable to tear her eyes away. Clara laughed softly. "Well, I'd say go for it. You deserve some excitement." But Lena hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let someone in again. Yet when their eyes met again across the room, her heart raced. "I'll be right back," Lena said, excusing herself from Clara's side. With every step she took toward him, her pulse quickened. As she reached the bar, the man turned slightly, his lips curling into a faint smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "You look like you're searching for something," he said, his voice low but filled with a strange familiarity. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Maybe I am, or maybe it's you I've been looking for." The man's eyes softened, a knowing look passing between them. "I didn't expect to find you here tonight," he said, his voice almost like a whisper, as though they were the only two people in the room. "But I'm glad I did." Lena's heart raced, and despite her cautious nature, something inside her urged her to keep talking. "And why is that?" she asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. His smile widened just slightly. "Because I've been waiting for you." The words sent a wave of heat through her, and Lena felt a strange sensation rising inside her. Something both thrilling and unsettling. She didn't know why, but she knew he wasn't just saying it casually. There was meaning behind his words. "I'm Daniel," he said, extending his hand. Lena hesitated for a moment, but then, almost without thinking, she took his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and the touch sent an electric shock through her. She pulled her hand back, feeling the warmth linger. "Lena," she said, her voice almost shaky. "And you? You've been waiting for me?" Daniel leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "In a way, yes. I've been looking for you." Lena's eyes narrowed, her skepticism rising again. "Looking for me? We've never met before." He nodded, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "No, but I feel like I've known you for a long time." Lena didn't know how to respond. There was something about him, something magnetic that pulled her in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation, this moment, wasn't as random as it seemed. "Why do you say that?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Because sometimes, Lena," he replied, his voice soft but intense, "you don't need to meet someone to feel like you already know them. Some connections are just meant to be." Lena felt a knot form in her stomach. His words struck a chord deep within her, and she couldn't help but wonder if he was right. Was this fate, or just some crazy coincidence? She had never believed in destiny, but there was something in the way he spoke, something in his eyes that made her question everything. Before she could ask him anything else, Daniel stepped back slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know this might seem strange, Lena, but trust me, there's more to this story than you realize." Lena opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the sound of the gala's music grew louder, pulling her attention away. She glanced around the room, her mind racing, and when she turned back to look at Daniel, he was gone. She blinked, searching the crowd for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Her heart sank, a feeling of loss sweeping over her. Had it all been some kind of illusion? Was he really there, or had she imagined the whole thing? She stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. But the more she thought about it, the more she couldn't shake the strange sense of familiarity that lingered in her mind. It wasn't until a week later, when Lena was at a cafe working on an article, that she received an unexpected package. Inside was a small handwritten note. "I told you I'd find you again. I'm not done waiting. If you feel the same, meet me where the city meets the sea. I'll be waiting." Lena's heart raced as she read the note. This couldn't be real. Could it? She was sure now that the encounter wasn't just some random event. He had been looking for her, just as he had said. But what was it about her that made him so certain they were meant to be? The note was signed simply, Daniel. That evening, Lena made a decision. She would go. There was something about him, something unexplainable, that pulled her in like a magnetic force, and she had to know the truth. The city was quiet as Lena walked toward the pier, the sounds of the waves crashing softly against the shore. Her mind raced with questions, but she kept moving forward. And when she reached the end of the pier, there he was, standing there, waiting, just as he had promised. "I knew you'd come," Daniel said, his voice filled with certainty. Lena stood in silence for a moment, taking in his words, the sound of the ocean and the night air that seemed to wrap around them both. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, whether she realized it or not. And just like that, everything else seemed to fade away as they stood there, the city lights flickering in the distance, as if the universe itself was holding its breath.